Is it on?
Se movió. Okay.
Okay. So,
Okay.
say that we've switched roles.
So now, as Suzanne Ross mentioned, my name is William Camacaro. I'm from Venezuela. I have been an activist in New York City for more than 23 years already. I'm Venezuelan American, and also I've been emphasizing the solidarity with Venezuela, but also with other part of the movement. I met Susan Ross years ago when she decided to go with us to Venezuela. That was a pleasure. She was very enthusiastic in that first trip and all the trips that she have been involved with us. At the point that she had been in Venezuela 4 times with us, and always she had been learning, curious, very showing solidarity to the movement in Venezuela and trying to engage people from the United States with the Venezuelan struggle and Latin American struggle, something that is extremely important for the movement, not only here, but also here in the United States, but also in South America. Especially for people to understand uh, the why it's so important. For example, right now we are facing a very horrible situation, economic situation in the United States because the sanctions. The United States have been sanctioning more than 35 countries all over the planet, and because the sanctions, we are not able to get enough resources, gas, oil. So at the end, United States sanctions itself, and we need people to know that sanctions really are horrible things, and only through those trips people can go to Venezuela, other countries that are under sanctions, like Cuba, Nicaragua, and learn the effects of the sanctions and how the sanctions are destroying the economy of those countries and how many people are dying. And so now in the United States, we're just watching a lot of inflation. The gasoline, the gallon is around $6 in some areas, in some areas $7. In Los Angeles was $7. I just was a few weeks ago in Los Angeles. It was $7 the gallon, and that's because the foreign policy of the United States. And that's why we need to be connected. We need to connect in the movement because everything is interconnected. Um, and that's why it is important for us when Susan travel and go anywhere to Bolivia or Venezuela, and she has been around for several other countries. But when she was there, also to talk about Mumia with them now, because this military complex and this a big amount of people in jail in the United States speak to us openly and loudly about the white supremacy regime that is dominating this country. Speak to us about this foreign policy that basically is dominated by the white supremacy mentality. And the police brutality is no other thing than the extension of the lynching and the modernity. So we can see 4 white policemen killing one black guy and shooting him 41 times than Amadou Diallo, and everybody will be relieved, not guilty. That's lynching and that's white supremacy. And right now we can see, for example, in Tijuana, more than 4,000 people from Ukraine trying to get inside the United States and receiving BA3 treatment in Tijuana, receiving all kind of medical assistance, getting all very nice food, and a lot of clothes and all kind of treatment, while they are screening their papers and allowing them to go through the border to start to work in United States. people that are coming from Ukraine, some of them probably are neo-Nazis, and they are getting here. So that's why we need to be interconnected, to see each other and to protect each other and to understand what is going on around us. All those struggles are related to our cause, are related to our passion for justice. So, but I want to say that, yes, Suzanne Ross has been with us and with me in Bolivia and Venezuela 4 times, but she only was talking about those trips because she likes to travel. She's a travel agency. But also she has been working with us in a lot of mobilization protests, and I always remember, Susan, the day that we went to protest against the the embassy of United States and the UN with Ramsey Clark.
Yep.
And you were there. And Ramsey Clark, I have a three-color Venezuelan flag jacket, and I said to Ramsey Clark, because he was the only one that was accepted to deliver the message that we have to the embassy. I said to Ramsey, can you deliver the letter? And you were there. Also, some people from December 12, from the Black Movement, some people from the IAC, International Action Center. There are a bunch of other people were there. So but the funny thing about Ramsey is I took off my jacket, and he was trying to fix himself on the jacket, just to show off the Venezuelan color when he was delivering the letter, the message to the embassy of United States at the UN. But I don't know. I think that you also were when we have a demo again, the Human Rights Watch.
Yes, with the pig, with the rat.
With a big rat.
With a big rat, to call him.
Remember that we were saying Human Rights Watch is a fucking rat?
Yeah. Because, Human Rights Watch had so betrayed honesty and had been such an ally of U.S. intervention. And
I think that this mic is unidirectional, so can get only. See, you sit
okay,
here.
I'll come sit next to you.
Or you can just get here. Yes. You can just get here. Sit down here. Sit down here. Hey, sit down here.
Right on the same seat. Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry.
Okay.
Right
So, we
Okay.
have to both sit on the same seat. So, Human Rights Watch has played such a terrible role around the world in terms of insisting on defending U.S. policy, always making excuses for whatever the United States was doing, and always calling, whether it was the Palestinians, calling them violators of human rights.
Yeah.
Finally, recently, they said something about Israel being an apartheid nation. The human rights finally had to break down in the past year. But before that, always defending U.S. interests and U.S. arguments. And so it was wonderful that day to march, to go to the headquarters of Human Rights Watch with a big rat, that's used in a lot of labor demonstrations to show, betrayal and lying and calling people a rat. No offense meant, I work with animal rights people. No offense meant to rats. They should not be blamed for the human rights violations for humans doing such awful things.
But you remember we have a statement to deliver to the Human Rights Watch, and they didn't want it to receive it. And
the United States Embassy also didn't. I was involved in 1972 at a takeover of the United States Embassy, which used to be a glass building. Now it looks like a fortress when you go there.
You don't see anything.
It used to be a glass building that looked like a tourist center, and it was a lot like that. You could come in and get literature and so on. And so during the bombing of Hanoi and Haiphong in the Christmas bombing, the famed horrific Christmas bombing, I worked with a group, and we organized a very peaceful takeover of the U.S. Embassy to the United Nations because everything was open. And I remember the role I had was to go talk to the receptionist and act like we were tourists and get information for her. And while I was talking to her, 20 people came in through revolving doors, and then we sat down and started chanting and wouldn't get out.
And that was in the
1972.
In the USA Embassy.
That was the embassy
at the UN.
At the UN, which was then open.
And after that, now you are not allowed to do that.
Not only can't you go in,
you can get arrested.
You can not only not get in, but you can't even deliver a letter to them. You have to deliver it to that security booth. There's a security booth outside the embassy now, where there's a guard or a few guards standing there, and they take a letter. Yes. If you want to send a letter, you can't bring it in to anybody. You can't deliver it to the embassy. The embassy is totally protected, and it's ironic and very significant because the United States could no longer have the facade of a democracy now. You have an embassy that looks like a fortress. And when I was in El Salvador in 1985, and we went to...
Sorry, my coffee is getting cold.
We went to meet with the U.S. ambassador to El Salvador. And so we came, about 50 of us, a large group. We came for a meeting with the ambassador to, I can't remember, I think it was Pickering was his name, a well-known ambassador. I think his name was Pickering. So we went to meet with him. When we came into the embassy on the outside was totally looked like a fortress. I mean, you couldn't see anything inside, and when you looked at it, you wondered what it was. And then you get inside, and it's beautiful flowers and birds, and it's completely like jarring and hard to absorb. And then you sit down and meet with this ambassador, and so the fortress that they had in San Salvador at the time is what they have in New York now. Yeah. And the United States empire looks the same everywhere because now it has to be a fortress. It can't be an open glass window place like it was in 1972. So it's just interesting. And we were there, and we were outside, and we were chanting, and having Ramsey Clark there is ironic. The former Attorney General of the United States coming to oppose the empire, to support the people of Venezuela and support the people of the world. What an incredible symbol.
Yeah, that was a very nice demo.
Yeah. So there were things like that, and we also had demonstrations. You guys used to organize demonstrations in front of the consulate where the right-wing Venezuelans who were in this country and supporting U.S. imperialism would come and gather and try to trash the place or whatever, and we would come and support the government of Venezuela by being at that. So there were incidents like that we went to, and then there was I also remember this was funny. You and Christina, another good friend of ours, and who was a solidarity activist for many years for Venezuela, you and Christina were responsible for organizing a reception for Nicaragua. And somehow I ended up there. And
who invited you?
Invited you? I came. I was supposed to bring food or wine or something. So I came, but after a while you disappeared, Christina disappeared, and so people would come to talk to me. And I didn't know enough. And I thought, where'd my friends go? How did they get me here? So we've had a lot of funny experiences too. And one of my favorite, one of the things that I thought was useful, a role that you asked me to play, was on that first trip to Venezuela when we were heading. Everybody wanted to go to the beach. And again, it was one of these long bus rides, and the bus driver got lost, and people started getting very cranky, and people have a tourist mentality a lot of times, even though this is not a tourist trip. this was a solidarity trip, but people started complaining about the bus driver and all that, and you and Christina came over to me and said, do something. Say something. Can you say something? So I remember...
Put order in the room. Put order
right,
in the room.
Get this under control. Get this under... So I gave a little rap about how... I remember I said, I don't want to guilt trip you and I don't want to moralize, but this is not a tourist trip we're here on. This is a solidarity trip, and it doesn't always go smoothly, and, let's try to be cool. Let's try to be cool. And people settled down, and so
finally we went to the beach.
And we finally went to the beach. It was beautiful. I remember going to the beach. It was very, very nice. So these trips, and the last trip was the most, in some ways for me, was the most important trip. Because there are moments in history when you have to take a position and stand up and to do something, whatever it is. In this circumstance, it was Guaido, the person that the United States had appointed as president of Venezuela.
I remember that something was preparing in those days, and he said, hey, let's go to Venezuela because Guaido is preparing something.
Exactly. So when you said, let's go to Venezuela, I remember saying right away, I'll go. And...
I was a little surprised, yes, because you mentioned something very important. People were receiving a lot of messages from the State Department.
False information, right. So people thought the situation was going to be dangerous, and, I couldn't imagine that they were going to do anything to us, but, you never know. And I just thought it was important to have a delegation, so I was very, very happy to go. And there was a Mumia conference the day before in Philadelphia, and I was talking about it, and I was treated as a heroine for going to this brave trip where we actually were staying in a hotel and having drinks.
You said to me that people were giving you a last kiss.
Last kiss. Farewell, wishing me luck, and farewell, be careful. And, the U.S. was putting out lies, so our family and friends in the United States were hearing that there was a coup. The threat was that they was going to overthrow President Maduro's government, and of course this was ridiculous because this punk, Guaido, who is a tool of the empire, but a ridiculous one, didn't have the power, the representation, the resources,
the people.
He didn't have that kind of support. So the government put out, got clearly won, and clearly in this showdown, Guaido was a complete embarrassment to the United States. And the next day, was May Day. So there was this huge parade, march, huge march, outdoors in, it seemed to me, 100-degree weather. and we were given seats pretty close to the front as foreigners. People always are very, very appreciative in these countries where the empire is so destructive when we show up. So there's a lot of love, just strangers coming over, hugging us, thanking us for being there. And it's very moving. And that was really the sentiment that I had in going there, wanting to show that kind of solidarity with the people and with the revolution. And I couldn't have been happier than to be at that parade. I mean, and to see President Maduro and his wife and other comrades and the different constituents that came marching in the parade. It was beautiful. And it was such a victory parade because this day before had been such a fiasco for Guaido and for the United States, like the United States just had.
Let me just refresh, because now with all the description that you
brought back your memory.
Yeah, I have all the memory now.
He's much younger than I am, so he should be remembering better than me. But what can I say?
But yes, that was.
Us old folks sometimes, really come through.
So, but I remember, yes, the day before, Juan Guaido went to the TV and said, "Hey, we took over a military cartel, uh, called La Carlota, and that was around 6 a.m. And some people approached me at around 6 a.m. through WhatsApp, and they asking me, "Do you think that he took the military force, the military base, La Carlota?" And it's what watching all the pictures, the images, and he said, "No, why? Because he's not in the Carlota. He's outside with a bunch of people." So he didn't, but he was making all that noise, and it was a very strange moment because for a lot of people outside of Venezuela, there was a coup taking
Right,
place,
right.
and nothing happened.
And there was nothing. We were about a mile away from where this coup was supposed to be. The hotel where we stayed, you could hear where the noise was coming from, and we were right there. And we didn't go out. People were trying to protect us, so we didn't go out in the street during that time. But I don't remember being frightened for a minute. And we started emailing to the United States. We sent a press release out that we're fine, that there is no coup. We called our families, everybody, and we stayed for a few days and it was just very inspiring. And it was, to me, those moments when you get a chance to do something like that are so precious. We live in the heart of the empire. We live in this horrible country. We live under fascism. What?
And remember, then we decided to go to the
Yes.
USA embassy
That was your idea.
to protest because it's empty, no one is there. But just to show our solidarity to Venezuela
Right.
and our position to the USA.
To be against the United States.
And then what happened?
They told us the Venezuelans didn't want a confrontation. And they politely asked us to please leave.
We appreciate.
We appreciate your gesture of support. We appreciate it, but please, we're trying to de-escalate. But it was wonderful to go up there. And I think the spirit of... And then instead we went to, what's the name of that park?
Simon Bolivar Square.
Simon Bolivar Square. And we spoke to... And you brought, some of the media came, and I have on my phone a speech where several of us spoke at that rally, and I spoke about why Venezuela should not become a vassal, a tool of U.S. imperialism. Look at Puerto Rico. I used the example of Puerto Rico, which they didn't do it voluntarily, but look at what happens to Puerto Rico when there was an earthquake.
Yeah.
And what Trump did. That's the example of what Venezuela would have to look forward to if it didn't resist U.S. imperialism. And it's actually a speech I got from Mumia. I didn't exactly realize it till it came back to me that Mumia had given that speech about Puerto Rico is a great example to all countries that are considering the advantages of allying with the United States, getting help from the United States. Look at the kind of help with Trump throwing paper towels.
The symbol that
The throwing paper towels as supposed charity to the people of Puerto Rico.
After the hurricane.
So it really was an example of why it was right, why we had to support the Venezuelans' resistance against U.S. imperialism, and why. So that's kind of... So let me ask you a little more about the interrelationship between the movement here and the revolutionary struggle in Venezuela, and by example, of course, it applies to other countries, not just to Venezuela. But as someone who's been so deeply involved in the Venezuelan struggle, how did you feel about... Did you feel the same integration that I felt, that our struggle were, that we were in common arms, that we were struggling with common arms against the enemy, you guys from Venezuela, I mean, the Venezuelan people from Venezuela, and we in this country, in various ways, one of which is to offer solidarity to Venezuela.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, as I mentioned before, everything is interconnected, and I feel like the problem that we have in the United States is that we don't have the same capacity to mobilize the people that this country had in the 60s. That thousands and thousands of people were demonstrating almost every week. And even, I have been listening and reading articles saying that Nixon was always complaining because a lot of people were protesting in front of the White House. 500,000.
But it wasn't 1,000s. Nixon was crazy, and so he would be upset when there were 2 people in front of the White House. He would lose his mind, people said later, when he saw 2 demonstrators, with the flag or with the sign in front of the White House. He was very upset.
But anyway, the reality is that we have been losing capacity of mobilization, and the situation is getting worse.
Right.
And it's because, in my opinion, people have to work long hours. People are getting very miserable salaries. People are also to get a university title. They have to get in a deep debt.
Tenure is right. And once you get a job, it's so hard to get a job in the university. It's not like the 60s.
Yeah, and not like the 60s. And also, there is an economy situation that may completely difficult to anyone to be involved
active, right?
In activism.
Absolutely.
And also to read and to get information.
People have 2 or 3 jobs, to survive.
And that's part of the strategy of the elite.
I agree.
And that's why we have been unable to, replicate what the 60s, 70s were.
In the 60s, I was a college teacher. Hard to believe, right? But I was a college teacher, and a very wild one, meaning I didn't follow the rules, and I was demonstrated a lot and organized students, and I just did not follow. I didn't follow any of the rules. Didn't care about publishing. Didn't care if they fired me.
You never followed the rules.
So I really was just organizing on campus, and when I came up for tenure, which was at the end of 5 years, of course they didn't give me tenure, and I lost my job.
Only 5 years?
Yeah. Between when I got fired, I was offered jobs by other places immediately. People who knew I had been fired. I was called and asked. I remember I was called and asked by Empire State University here to come for an interview. And they wanted to hire me for the psychology department. And I had just been fired. I never was without a job. I mean, I had a PhD from Columbia, so that piece of paper was worth a lot of money. I always got another job. I was fired from every job I had. It's funny.
Troublemaker.
Well, it was very effective. I did what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to do was political work, and I did it. But I often say to people who are 20, 30 years younger than me, I wouldn't advise you to do what I did, because you couldn't get another job. So the economic situation was so different. I never worried about a job. Once I got my PhD, I knew that piece of paper was worth a lot. And to this day, I'm able to work. To this day, with that piece of paper, I'm able to work. With all the things I've done, the number of times I've been fired, the fact that I was in the Weather Underground, none of that has stopped me from working and getting a job. To this day, I'm able. I do work in private practice, but I'm saying that the economic situation, what you're saying, is so true. Not only that, but in those times, now, CUNY, I was teaching at CUNY. CUNY in those days, I think it was 2/3 of the faculty were full-time. Wow. And 1/3 or less were part-time.
Wow.
Now it's completely the reverse. 2/3 are part-time, have to teach at 4 different colleges, have to run around to different campuses, Queens College, City College.
Of course, now the military budget is more than half
Everything.
of the budget.
Everything goes to military. So there's nothing for education. So people